Greetings and salutations, you little nasties, and welcome back to a very special episode. I am your host, the Nasty Bedazzler. Now, this one's been a long time in the making, and what we're going to be doing today is looking at my Nintendo 64 and what I've had to do with that in order to get it ready to join the rank of the other consoles that are behind me. Now, this was a bit of a process. I've had to mod it and add RGB capabilities to it, which we will be taking a look at here in just a moment. And then I had to add more shelves to this display behind me so I could fit more consoles in, because I am currently out of space to add anything else to it. And then the third thing we're going to be looking at today is what you need, the components that are required in order to get a setup like mine running and then have it look nice on a big screen TV like what you see behind me. I'm going to cover all of that in this video. Now, I hope you guys find this information useful, but if you have no need for it, I hope you at least find the video entertaining. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Quick disclaimer here, do not use this video as a modding guide to follow along to, and since this isn't intended as a guide, I'm going to rapid fire through a lot of this first section. That was the original purpose when I first started filming this. However, I shifted focus to a much broader idea to show you what you need to do in order to add consoles to a retro collection and have them output RGB if that is something you're interested in doing. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the mod we're going to be doing on the N64 here is the N64RGB mod from Tim Worthington. There's a link in the description for those that are interested in doing this themselves, as well as a link to the directions to do it. Also, there's a few links to some videos from Long Island Retro Gaming that I loosely followed when I was unclear on some directions from Tim Worthington's guide. As I'm basically giving a general rundown of how to do this, I don't suggest you use this video as an actual guide, since very quickly into recording this section I realized I just do not have the setup or the camera skills necessary to capture closely the work that I'm doing. So I am more or less just giving you a general idea of what you need to do in order to mod this console for RGB output. If you are unclear of what I mean by RGB output, I'll go over some of that later in the video, because it might not even be necessary depending on your console setup. The first thing you need to do is take apart your N64. Since Nintendo sucks in this way, they've opted to use a specific rare kind of screw to hold this beast together I've only seen on Nintendo consoles. You can buy the specific tool you need to disassemble your Nintendo console off of Amazon for a couple bucks. I'll throw a link to that below. I'm not getting any money for any of these links if you choose to purchase anything. I'm just providing them to you to make your life easier. Once you got the console taken apart, you'll need to remove 8 or so screws around the heatsink to take that off. Once you get that removed, you'll be looking at the motherboard, and this is where the magic happens for the most part until you solder your connections to the Tim Worthington N64RGB chip. I'm just going to take a timeout from my script here and also just say, because it just popped into my brain, if a lot of this doesn't make sense to you, you're probably just better off sending your console off or just having someone else do this for you that knows what they're doing. I'm kind of going into this assuming you have a general idea of how some of this works, so if none of this sounds even vaguely familiar to you, I just suggest you don't do this one yourself. And, God, holy shit. Okay, moving on. Let me just take a drink of water here. First things first, if you have the MAV NUS or AVDC NUS variant of the console, which I have here, and you can tell by looking at the chipset on the motherboard, they're all labeled. So if you see either of these two labels on either of those chips, you'll know which ones you got. You'll need to use this pin adapter here. If you bought the ribbon cable with the mod, you will want to strip the ends on both sides and apply a little bit of solder to each tip to get those ready to use. You'll also want to remove 5 of these cables from one end of this cable for use later. Once you're set with that, you either go ahead and solder these cables directly to the chip if you have the DENC NUS or VDC NUS chips, which I won't be covering here because that's not what I'm doing and that's not what I've got. Or you'll need to attach this adapter directly to the side of the chip here and solder the pins directly to the legs. That's what I'm going to be doing. This can actually be the most difficult part, and the reason you're doing this is because the legs are too close together on the chip to solder and the ribbon cable directly to it. This adapter makes this section of the job much easier, assuming you can get this adapter soldered on without a hitch. The main key here is to not use much solder, if any at all, because you do not want to bridge any of these connections with solder, and that is just connecting multiple connections together on accident with solder. You don't want to do that. Once the connections are all set, you're ready to now solder the ribbon cable to the opposite pads on the adapter. Go ahead and carefully do that, and you might want to use a microscope to see better, which I typically do. And I'll be honest with you, I fucked this section up multiple times, and it took me multiple tries to get this correct. If you have a multimeter, now would be a good time to break that out to test these connections. For the first couple times while I was revisiting this mod and trying it again, since I kept bridging these connections and cannot see where with the microscope, my multimeter would have come in incredibly handy, but I couldn't find it for the longest time. Finally, I found it and I was able to nail this part of the process down. Once all of these connections on the adapter are secure and there is no bridging, you will now connect the opposite end of the ribbon cable to the N64RGB chip. This has tape on the back side of it. Connect this to the top of the N64 heatsink, and then you can go ahead and start soldering on the opposite end of the cables to the correct pads. You need to make sure that you are connecting the correct cable from each pad on the adapter to the correct pad on the N64RGB chip. I won't go into great detail here. If you plan on doing this yourself, you will absolutely need to be looking at the directions on Tim Worthington's website anyway, and that gives a great breakdown of what goes where. Also, on those videos too from Long Island Retro Gaming, he does a pretty good job at breaking that stuff down, and he's able to show that in much more detail. When you finish up connecting these when you finish up connecting these cables to the chip, you will then need to send this signal we took from the chip on the motherboard and routed to the N64 chip to the RGB pins on the back of the motherboard. Did you get all that? Look, there's a reason this isn't my major focus on this channel. I'm terrible at explaining how to do this kind of shit. I'm also terrible at showing it, but moving on. This is what is going to actually output the RGB signal that we wanted instead of the built-in shitty composite video that was originally intended with this console, and you are definitely going to need a special cable and in most cases a special connection in order to get this signal to your HD TV. I absolutely will be covering this later in the video since my purpose here is to give you a breakdown of what you need to do in order to have a game set up like what I've got, and if you want to use RGB signal for your consoles, you will be doing a lot of modding like what I'm doing here. And that is why this is included in this video. Once you have the cables soldered to the appropriate pins on the back of the N64 motherboard, you will then solder these to the N64RGB on the opposite end of where we soldered the last cables. This will conclude the job, though there are optional things you can do, which I have not yet done, but plan to do in the future, like enabling in-game console reset, as well as a de-blur switch, which was unavailable at the time of making this, so I had to skip that section. As I said, though, I do plan on going back in the future and adding these features in, as I've already ordered the switch I need, and now I'm just waiting for it to get here. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, and I did mention this briefly, I did have tons of issues with this mod, which is par for the course when it comes to practically anything I do. I did desolder all of these connections and start fresh many times over the course of 2 weeks. An honest number for this, I think I had to redo it 4 or 5 times before I finally got it right, and it's insanely frustrating. Then I would end up taking a day or 2 or 3 days off between tries, just because it's very disheartening to do all the work and realize you fucked something up. One of the biggest issues I had doing this was that I couldn't find my multimeter to check the connection for continuity, so it was very difficult for me to figure out what exactly was soldered incorrectly and what was causing me the issues. So starting over was the easiest thing for me to do to get it right. When I finally found my multimeter, which was conveniently in my car because why wouldn't it be, that's when I was able to finally complete this mod. So it is highly recommended that you have one of these on hand before starting this project like a dipshit like I did. Once you're finished here, carefully put everything back together and move on to testing the console, assuming you have the necessary cables and whatnot in order to do so. Just hook everything up, put a game in, turn it on. If you did everything right, it should boot up. So there you go, now you know what it takes to mod the console. Now, as I said, that wasn't supposed to be used as a guide, but you do now have a general idea of what it takes in order to mod a console to make it RGB compatible. Now, the next section we're going to be looking at here is just simply adding more shelves to this display, and then we'll go right into the components section after that one. Now it's on to the shelves. After collecting so many consoles, I found myself running out of places to display them. I realized that I would need to be adding shelves to one of my displays, and I knew in advance this was going to be a pain in the ass, but decided to do it anyway since I had little choice in the matter if I wanted to add more consoles. Now, just like with soldering, I am by no means a professional when it comes to work like this, so it more than likely took me a lot longer to complete this than it would someone with a lot more experience. I'm capable of doing it, but I suck at doing it, and unlike with soldering, I actually hate doing this kind of work. I don't mind woodworking in general, but this is beyond my comfort zone. There was a really good chance I irreparably fucked all of this up. I did not in the end, but I half expected to, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't. First thing I needed to do was go to the home improvement store, in my case it was Lowe's, and find the right kind of board that matches the same type of thickness as the shelves that already exist on the display. Unfortunately for me, I could not find the same thickness at this store, and since I'm lazy and impatient and didn't feel like going directly down the street to a different home improvement store, I instead bought the closest thing I could find to what I needed. It's about half as thick thick as what I needed, so I didn't even really come close, but overall it worked for what I needed it for, and quite frankly, it still looks pretty good if I say so myself. I will always cut corners every chance I can. That's just what I do because my patience for things like this is nearly zero. So I get home with the board and I start measuring out the cuts I need to make. At this time, I'm only going to add 2 shelves, and there's room for another towards the top of the display, but I did not even come close to feeling like doing that at this time. I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. So I start making the cuts I need to make on the board with a magic marker. Once that's completed, I head outside wearing my Star Wars shirt and safety goggles and begin making the cuts I need with my handy dandy jigsaw from Black & Decker. The first 2 panels I cut out are the 2 panels I ended up using, even though I should have cut a few more as I could have done a better job after getting warmed up. Though if you remember what I said earlier about being incredibly impatient when it comes to this kind of work, you'll understand why I opted not to. These cuts were good enough and we can move on to the painting phase. After I cut the boards, I used sandpaper and went around the edges to make sure they were smoothed out. I also lightly sandpapered the top and bottom of the board to help the spray paint stick better. So I put on some socks and then my fashionable Crocs and went outside again to paint this crap. This is the easiest part of anything I've done for this entire project. Spray painting shit is simple, so I'm not going to go into great detail here. I gave each side a couple of coats and let it dry overnight. In order to make the paint job match the existing wood on the display, I needed a specific kind of gray glitter paint by Krylon that goes over the black paint. Unfortunately, I could not find the exact same kind I used years ago when painting this for my now ex-girlfriend. And I only tell you that so you're fully aware I did not paint it this way for myself. So I needed to try to find a compromise. I ended up going with a gray glitter clear coat spray and was really happy to find out when using it that it has absolutely zero gray glitter in it whatsoever and was more or less just 100% clear. Well, this isn't what I needed at all, so what do I do instead? Well, I found a silver crayon and went over the board with that, and it did the trick. Now, here's a hot tip for you, just as a little side note. Always have a large box of Crayola crayons laying around the house. You'll end up using them more than you know, especially if you have hardwood floors. They come in really handy for that. Anything wood-related, actually, you can half-ass your way through a lot of bullshit by just using crayons. So now that these panels look, close enough to the way we want them to look, we are ready to go. We can now disassemble this rack and start cutting the posts to insert the new shelves into. I measured out the halfway point on the 8 posts I plan on cutting, taped them together in groups of 4, and then cut these easily with my meter saw, if that's how you pronounce that. Now, this part was all very easy. Now comes the biggest pain in the ass in the entire project relating to these shelves. What I need to do now is drill 4 holes in each corner of the new panels I cut out. Simple enough, I just used the existing shelves as a guide here. But now I need to drill a hole through the top of each post I cut and insert a 2-sided screw to connect each half of these cut posts together with the new shelves resting on top and the screws going through the holes I cut. Unfortunately, I didn't capture much footage of this since I forgot all about recording the footage, but this entire process took me about 5 hours total to get this right, and besides, it wouldn't have been very interesting to watch anyway. It was just me sitting on my kitchen floor fucking with wood for hours. Once that was all set, all I had to do was reassemble everything and rearrange my consoles in a way that pleases me on the display with the new shelves. I opted to go from largest to smallest console, starting from the ground up. Then I had to connect my Nintendo 64 with power and plug in the Scart cable into my switcher, and we were good to go. In the next section, I'm going to cover some information on the cables you need, what Scart Switchers are, some info on Upscalers, and all the other fun stuff you might need to know if you plan on doing something similar to what I've got here.
Okay guys, and welcome to the last section of the video. We're going to shoot this one guerrilla style, and I'm just going to try to keep this brief but as informative as possible. And if you guys ever have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to leave a comment and I will answer you. I usually get back to any questions within a couple of days. First off though, look, if you're planning on having a collection of consoles like what I've got here, and if you want to do RGB like I do, and the reason we do RGB is because it'll give you the cleanest signal that you can get from these consoles. Unfortunately, many of these consoles don't have RGB right out of the box. The only ones here that I've got here, and the PS5, I think it goes without saying that's HDMI, but is the Dreamcast, the PC Engine kind of. I've got this Terra Onion, I can't remember what it's called, but that's an addition on the back that just happens to put out RGB, so that's nice. I didn't have to do any modifications there, but it might actually have RGB already on it though. And the GameCube actually just has what is it? It's a GC MK2, I believe it's called, and that's an adapter in the back, and that'll actually output RGB, so that's nice. I didn't have to do much with that. And then just the Sega Genesis and the Sega Saturn. Those didn't require any extra work to get RGB on those, but the Super Nintendo required a small mod to do. The Neo Geo required a pretty lengthy mod. The Famicom was a fucking nightmare. I covered that briefly in my Kirby review that I do. And of course the Nintendo 64, which we just covered today, obviously. And so if you're gonna have multiple consoles, what you're gonna need to do is get yourself what's called a Scart Switcher. Now, I was having a hard time finding these for a moment, but they might be easier to find now at this point. This is the Hydra, and I can't remember, it's Letharic, I believe, is the, Letharic.pl, I believe is the website there. And this was nice, but these are a little expensive. I think I paid maybe $250 for this one, but I was happy to get it. The last ones I got were from a company called Otaku Games from Hong Kong, but as far as I know, they aren't doing this anymore, but they're still open and just taking people's money, so don't buy from them. I don't know if you can see it back here. You probably can't. It's too dark back here, but there's my one from Otaku Games over there. It's a really nice switcher too. It's a shame that they just sort of fell off the map and just started being scumbags. But so now I've got this Scart Switcher, and then the output of that goes into just one of the inputs on this one, and then they link up that way. And so how these all connect, what you're looking at here, this is a Scart cable. This is a European standard. And the reason we do Scart and the reason we do RGB is because this gets you the best picture that you can get from these retro consoles. So, I mean, it makes the component cables that originally shipped with most of these look like absolute garbage. So this is really, really nice. So this is the way that I've decided I wanted to go. Unfortunately, this is a really pricey way to go. I mean, like, I'm looking at maybe 10 Scart cables here, and you're looking at maybe 25 to 30 bucks a piece for good ones. And most of these are Insurrection Industries. I've also got some what is it, like Pack-a-Punch, I believe. I can't remember all the different brands here, but you absolutely get what you pay for when it comes to these Scart cables, so do not cheap out on these. Buy these from a reputable brand, and you can find out a little bit more information. There's a website, I believe it's called Retro RGB, and they cover a lot of this information, and it's definitely worth checking out if you want to go that route. But these are pricey, but again, you're going to get the best picture quality possible with those. And so what happens from there is from the Scart Switcher, that plugs into an Upscaler. So this is kind of necessary here if you want to play these old games on your new HD TVs. You're going to want an Upscaler here, and this is going to line double and do a lot of different things with the resolution and the picture. And now you can get a lot of the profiles online that you need. This is the OSSC, and there's a couple different options you've got. There's a really popular one called the Framemeister. However, that's super expensive. They don't make it. They haven't made it for years. And so if you want to get one, you're going to be paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars on eBay for it. I think they're topping out at like $500 or $600 at this point. Not worth it when you can just get this. And I think you can get this for about $200. Yeah, it's totally worth it. And then just go online, pull off the profiles for the consoles that you use. And then when you fire up a console, you know, it feeds right into the side here with the Scart cable from one of the Scart switchers you got. You just set the profile on here and it takes care of the rest. It just sends the signal to your TV through HDMI, and the picture looks fantastic. All of the video game footage that I capture for any of my videos on YouTube, it's coming from this. So I've got my, it's split here. So the signal comes out of here, and one of the signals goes to my television up here, and then the other one goes to my capture card in my PC. So the image that you're seeing there in all of my videos is coming straight from this OSSC, and it looks really nice. And that's pretty much everything you need there. If you're going to be doing a setup similar to this one, you just want to get some RGB cables that fit the console that you're using. You're going to want to get a Scart switcher here, and I would suggest an automatic one. I've got two automatic Scart switchers, so you don't have to manually do it per console here. And then you want to get an Upscaler. Now, again, if you guys do have any questions about this, I know I glossed over that, and you know, it's a little bit more in depth than that. But if you do have any questions regarding any of this, feel free to leave a comment like down below, and I will respond to you guys. I usually get back to comments within a day or two. So that's it for all of this stuff. It's been really fun. This was an interesting video for me to make. Again, this will definitely never be a focus of mine here. This is 100% just a one-off video, and I look forward to going back to just some standard video game reviews within the next week or so. So we'll get that out, but I just want to say thank you very much, guys, for watching this video. It's been fun. I'm just relieved that I actually got to finish this one, and we will see you guys on the next video. You guys have a great night.